Hey, you probably know this, but the gaming world, as great as it is often filled with a lot of disappointments. So today, we're taking a look back at the last 10 years and talking about some of the biggest disappointments. This isn't a list of like the worst games ever made or anything, but games that just genuinely disappointed us for one reason or another. There's gonna be plenty of disagreement and stuff, so we're looking forward to hearing from you in the comments, but we got 10 games, so let's get started off with number 10. And really, get the obvious one out of the way. It's Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League from this year, 2024. Now, this is kind of a dead horse at this point. We've talked about it a lot on this channel. When it released, unfortunately, it just felt too forced into a games as a service model, and it kind of lost a lot of the magic touches that Rocksteady, the developers' previous games had with like stuff like the Batman Arkham series. It had an unfulfilling story, some cool gameplay concepts and traversal, but ultimately boring missions and enemy types, and frankly, it was pretty repetitive, despite the fact that the game was technically designed around keeping you playing endlessly. It released a new season, or the start of the season, with Joker content and updates, and unfortunately that didn't really grab us either as much as we wanted to give it a shot. Now, in hindsight, I know it's easy for people to say like, oh, well, you saw the gameplay trailers, you saw that it was kind of going to be this always online microtransaction games as a service type thing.
Always boomerang. Your predictability will be your downfall, Harkness. Boomerang is dedicated to self-abasement.
So what are you expecting? Why are you disappointed? Well, frankly, again, we're still just disappointed because the developers' previous games were just so good. You had to be there for the launch of Arkham Asylum, man. That came out of nowhere, and it was incredible, and it only went up from there with Arkham City and Arkham Knight. So this just feels like such a jarring shift into something that was just so painfully disappointing. Again, at this point, like, we've talked it to death. I think a lot of people on YouTube have, to be frank. So with that, let's move on. Because over at number 9, we have another thing that was talked to death, certainly on YouTube and Twitch. It's The Day Before. The Day Before is another one where you might look at it and go like, yeah, no duh, you were disappointed. What did you expect? I mean, the lead up to it, a lot of people were speculating that it was a scam or it wasn't a real game, and sure. But there was that first trailer, that first concept trailer that showed a game that was like a clever mix of The Division, some multiplayer and like Tarkov type stuff, mixed with The Last of Us. It just seemed cool. Even if it was a little too good to be true, we still couldn't help but hope for something good. And then ultimately, The Day Before was absolutely a mess. It was clearly underbaked and underfunded and just totally half-assed and had none of the original ideas it presented. It just threw like every single gameplay concept at the wall, but didn't really finish any of them. And there was so much to it, with essentially it getting taken down, the developers kind of talking smack. Like, it was such a mess. But the reason why I'm pointing this out is because the Day Before was a huge disappointment for a lot of people, maybe more casual video game fans, because don't forget, this was one of the most wishlisted games on Steam. Like, it was top of the charts. There was anticipation for this. It piqued people's interests. Maybe not the people who read gaming news and social media every single moment of every single day, but a lot of people on Steam saw this and went, oh, cool, I'm wishlisting that. I want to play that. And then this game just came out and was gone in like 3 days. So there were a lot of people out there, I think, that were disappointed. Those who didn't really follow along with what the hell was going on. And, you know, you need to be informed as a consumer, but still, it was worth pointing out. This is higher on the list, again, because a lot of us were pretty skeptical, but still, it's a funny one to talk about. Some of the glitches from this game when it released are hilarious. Anyway, let's move on. Next, over at number 8, we have the Callisto Protocol from the end of 2022. This thing squeezed in December, and kind of for a lot of people looked to be like the next big thing, the return of Dead Space, a spiritual successor to Dead Space, if you will, specifically because it was headed up by Glenn Schofield with a new studio. He was one of the original people behind Dead Space, so this seemed like a good cinematic, third-person, gory, survival horror adventure type thing. And unfortunately, it released, and it was by no means the worst game in the world. I absolutely will defend a lot of it, but it was not the next big thing. It was a little disappointing with how the game kind of ended, and it was a little short and just feels like missed potential. The melee wasn't too solid. The gameplay, not as compelling as we'd hoped, certainly not as engaging as, its grandfather, Dead Space, that's for sure. It definitely had some incredible, almost jaw-dropping visuals and a few good moments. But ultimately, frankly, it just wasn't very memorable. And I think that's a damning thing on its own. Again, it's not the worst game in the world. It does have some fans, but when it released, it was a full price game. It was pretty short and it just wasn't quite as cool as we were hoping. I would still, and I said it when it came out and I did the before we buy, I would like to see a sequel that kind of expands on things. I don't know if we're ever gonna get that, but for now, that's where this is at. Now, next over at number 7, 2022, saw no shortage of disappointments because this one is the Saints Row reboot. Now, I know this is another one where people could have looked at it and said, that doesn't look that great, but the disappointment is that it's the Saints Row franchise, which really was at its peak for quite some time, and this was the last gasp of the franchise, to be frank. That's the biggest disappointment, is that Saints Row went out with a whimper with this game. After this, Volition, the studio behind stuff like Red Faction and all the original Saints Row games, were kind of shut down and absorbed into a larger company, and it's a damn shame, because the Saints Row reboot just doesn't really have any identity or life in it. It feels like a game that tried to appease everyone. It tried to make all fans of the series happy, the people who like the crazy over-the-top shenanigans of the newer games, and the people who like the gang warfare GTA clone stuff of the earlier games. And by trying to please everybody, it felt like it just had no focus in its direction and ended up just being this lifeless, kind of forgettable game. It really felt like it had nothing to say, nothing to do, and the biggest, most damning thing is that it just wasn't fun. Oh, not to mention the fact that it was also glitchy. Like, it was an undercooked mess. There was another game that did not have enough time in the oven. That's a whole other thing. We could talk about that with a lot of games, but yeah. Saints Row Reboot was, again, just the dying last gasp of a once great franchise, and that is massively disappointing, dude. Next over at number 6, we have Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite from 2017. Hey, do you remember Marvel vs. Capcom's new game, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite? No? You probably don't, because it very quickly just disappeared into the ether. I don't really know what it was with this one. There was some controversy before the game launched, some people making fun of the game's DLC, the content, the special edition stuff with it. There was a lot to it. And then when the game released, it just kind of didn't take off. It didn't take the world by storm like it could have, because the older Marvel vs. Capcom games were incredible. But this just felt like a massive misstep for Capcom. Capcom, who, to be totally honest, has been doing a pretty good job lately and really kind of giving the fans what they want and making the right moves. But there were a few years, many years ago, where Capcom was just slipping up left and right. And it kind of feels like Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was one of those last big slip-ups before they finally got their shit together, got a good head on their shoulders. Unfortunately, it was the one that had to die on the sword. And I haven't really thought about it since I just mentioned it in this video. So with that, let's move on. Next over at number 5, we have Redfall from 2023. Yeah, man. I mean, yep, another one that's beating a dead horse. But in more recent years of the last 10 years, there's a lot of disappointments. And Redfall was a massive one. It felt unfinished. It was a technical mess. Absolutely buggy, but most importantly, the game just was missing the fun factor. It didn't have an interesting or compelling loop and just felt like this weird shoehorned co-op game that didn't take advantage of what the developers were good at. This is Arcane, the creators of the Dishonored games and Deathloop. So like, they know what they're doing. They have the sauce, but with Redfall, they did not have it at all. We still don't really know what the hell happened with this one, and that is the biggest disappointment. It's Arcane making a bad game. it absolutely stings. Now, Deathloop is a game that has some people that really love it and some people that don't like it, and that's fine. But with their follow-up game, Redfall, man, this is like inarguably just not fun. Nobody liked this one, and it was pretty much dead on the vine. There were some good ideas. You could see why they decided to make the game at some point, but something got lost in translation, and that was a bummer. And we're still really sad about it because we just want them to make Dishonored 3 or a new Prey or something, please. Next, over at number 4, we have Cyberpunk 2077. The original 2020 release, as you probably know, was pretty borked. You know, some people played through the game and still enjoyed it, but for a lot of people out there, the game was a technical mess. Specifically, we remember because we played the PC version and it was, it was all right. It had some issues and it still definitely was not ready for release. And, we're still holding CD Projekt Red's feet to the fire with that. But the biggest thing, the worst thing, were the console releases. The PS4 version, I remember specifically, was this blurry, muddy mess. It was a lifeless world with a bad frame rate and more glitches than you'd ever seen. Certainly more than the PC version, as far as I can remember. A lot of people documented this. You can look it up out there. It is absolutely rough and unacceptable. I still can't believe they released this game in this state for some people, and it really muddied the waters and, of course, the reputation of CD Projekt Red for a lot of folks. The PS4 version was so bad it was actually delisted from the PSN store for a while. That is absolutely devastating. We are really glad that the game found its way. CD Projekt Red put their money where their mouth is and they stuck with it and made it, frankly, a pretty awesome game. The game that some people saw in 2020. They made it that good for everybody and then some. The expansions, the updates are all great. But that PS4 version was such a massive disappointment. What a mess, dude. Now, next at number 3, we have Babylon's Fall from 2022. Now, this game looked generic from the start, so it wasn't like we had high hopes for it, but the biggest disappointment was the fact that it was Platinum Games that worked on it. The people behind so many games, like Bayonetta, Nier Automata, Astral Chain, The Wonderful 101, Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. I mean, these guys got it figured out. And Babylon's Fall felt like this weird game that Square Enix wanted them to make as like a live service thing, a weird co-op brawler with a lifeless, generic, uninspired world. Nothing even remotely close to the influences they've had in the past, just the sense of style, excitement, cool flashy combat, none of that was here. And the game was an absolute failure immediately because it was something that nobody really asked for. It's something that just didn't look exciting to anybody. And it was just so uninspired. It felt like something that they were obligated to do. And the game failed pretty much instantly. I understand every studio maybe has to take a contract gig from a bigger studio to make something to keep the lights on, but Babylon's Fall, man, that was really depressing. Now next, down at number 2, we have Mass Effect Andromeda. This was a big one. I would say it was a disappointment, specifically because of the pedigree. It's BioWare, the people behind the original Mass Effect games, Knights of the Old Republic, Jade Empire. I can go on and on. They know how to make a good RPG, and I think they were so good at it that a misstep just felt like such a big miss. The original trilogy, the original Mass Effect games were so incredible, some of the best sci-fi RPGs out there, that anything less than that with a follow-up just would hit even harder. And Mass Effect Andromeda was a gut punch for a lot of people. It does have its fans out there, but it just didn't feel like it was on the same level of quality as the previous games. From a storytelling standpoint, of course, it didn't really live up to that, but also from a technical level, the game was famous for a bunch of glitches and bugs, just an unacceptable thing to sell to people, for a lot of people, but also disappointing in the sense that it just was nowhere near as memorable or compelling as those original games. You didn't get as many characters that really stuck with you here. You didn't get as many cool planets and moments that really remained in your heart. That's something that BioWare was really great at, and still to this day, honestly, they're still chasing that. They're still trying to live back up to that. I don't know if they ever will, but Mass Effect Andromeda in 2017 was kind of the beginning of the end in terms of just like a streak of disappointments. And now finally, down at number 1, we have PT from 2014. Yeah, we're reaching back to the very end of the last 10 years, but we still think about PT all the time. This was Playable Teaser, something released on the PlayStation Store from Hideo Kojima and company that was a playable teaser that felt kind of like a first-person sci-fi horror experiment. It was really cool, really unique, and, you know, horror is definitely subjective, but it was very scary for a lot of people. The mood, the atmosphere, the pretty realistic graphics, this thing had it going on. It was a small taste, it was experimental and cerebral, but it was cool as hell. And then it ended with a massive tease that it was the start of a new Silent Hill game called Silent Hills, featuring Norman Reedus from Walking Dead and Boondock Saints, among many other things. And that was just cool. This looked amazing. This felt amazing. But the biggest disappointment is that the Silent Hill or Silent Hills game that this teased never ended up releasing. It was canceled. There was so much fallout and all weird behind the scenes business stuff with Hideo Kojima and his publisher Konami that something dropped out. Silent Hills was canceled, and PT was kind of erased from the internet. You can't access it, you can't download it through traditional means now, and they just totally tried to whitewash the whole thing, just totally erase it, and it's a damn shame. That's disappointing, is the fact that Hideo Kojima and team worked on something and made something cool, even if it was small and it didn't lead to anything, it just doesn't really exist anymore. That absolutely sucks. But hey, bad things like this happen in the game industry. What are you gonna do? So speaking of bad things happening, these were 10 disappointments from the last 10 years. There are definitely more out there, and you may disagree with some of these choices, so let us know in the comments. We'd love to make a part 2, because everybody has their own disappointment for one reason or another. We tried to find some unique angles to some of these, like I said, The Day Before and Callisto Protocol, so let us know what you guys are thinking in the comments with any of these, and if you like this video and you like talking games with us every day, click on the like button's all you gotta do. It really helps us out. And if you're new, maybe consider subscribing, hitting that notification bell, because we put out new videos every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.